Tonight, Kiss the Ring, the Prime Minister's dinner date with President-elect Donald Trump last Friday night. It is Wednesday, December 4th, 2024. From Montreal, this is Night Talk. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And I'm Eddie Tkalik, back in Montreal.
And how was your trip to LA, Eddie?
It was wonderful. Got a chance to spend a lot of quality time with family. My wife and I went to visit her cousins. Had a fantastic Thanksgiving dinner. It's our second U.S. Thanksgiving dinner. Had a lot of fun. Came across all walks of life in that room. Met my second Retrumplicon, which was interesting. Yeah, we had a great time, and I think we're happy to be back. As I look out my window, there's snow. I'm not too happy about that, so maybe it's time to get out of here again.
Well, the upside of it is right now, even though it's still snowing a bit, it's just a very light dusting on the ground. And last week we had the same sort of thing, and it melted like the next day. So it was great. I quite enjoyed that part of it. I didn't see it snow. It snowed overnight, and in the morning when I went out, it was starting to melt already. So anyhow,
consider ourselves lucky. Ontario got belted with snow from what I saw.
Yeah, big time. The lake effect snows, and in Buffalo, did you see any of the video from the Bills stadium?
My goodness, yeah.
Yeah, they're troopers. That's all I can say. They're troopers.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, last Friday night, Eddie, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc, along with key PMO staffers, flew to Mar-a-Lago for dinner with President-elect Donald Trump. The get-together was not included on the PM's daily itinerary, and apparently it was requested by Trudeau after Trump dropped the tariff bomb early last week, a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods immediately following his inauguration on January 20th. Now, not a lot has been said in the wake of the meeting. LeBlanc assured Trump we are in the process of beefing up our border security with drones and helicopters for use along the border area. Now, on Monday, the opposition had some questions about the visit and results. The PM was not in the House of Commons at the
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are worried about their jobs and whether they can afford to put food on the table. Donald Trump's unfair tariffs will threaten those jobs and jack up prices for Canadians. Last week, the Prime Minister met with him, but he has nothing to show for it, and he came back empty-handed. Canadian workers want to know, did the Prime Minister make it clear to Donald Trump that balancing the U.S. budget on the backs of Canadian workers won't work for Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to disagree with my friend from Edmonton, Griesbach, but the idea that we came back empty-handed is completely false. He knows very well that we had a productive discussion with Mr. Trump and his future cabinet secretaries. The Prime Minister, of course, spoke about the importance of protecting the Canadian economy and Canadian workers from tariffs, but we also discussed with our American friends the negative impact that those tariffs could have on their economy, on an affordability in the United States as well. And Mr. Speaker, I think the commitment from President Trump to continue to work with us was far from empty-handed.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister went to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring and returned with absolutely nothing, all while there's serious gaps in our immigration system. For example, there are over 260,000 unprocessed refugee claims right now in the system. The Liberals are paying out billions of dollars every year for hotels, food, and medical costs for these claimants. They're even allowed to work while they wait nearly 4 years to be processed. Why would people leave Canada voluntarily when they can hitch themselves to this NDP Liberal gravy train? Mr. Speaker, where is the Canada First plan to keep our borders secure?
The Honourable Minister for Citizenship, Immigration and Refugees.
While the Leader of the Opposition was in his basement figuring out what rhyme to put up on Twitter to express his displeasure with the government, the Prime Minister of Canada was meeting with Donald Trump, our most important partner. That is responsible. At the same time, when he's not doing that in his basement, Mr. Speaker, he's skipping around the Greater Toronto Area, promising everyone and anyone visas to this country and not to deport them. That is not responsible. That's not serious. We plan to be serious.
Wow. I love that Miller comment at the end.
Yeah, that was great. He actually surprised me because he's usually pretty just, really straightforward overall on it.
Yeah.
Now, so the Prime Minister wasn't in the House on Monday and left it to ministers to handle the questions, but he was in the House yesterday, and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was looking for answers.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, whether one thinks that President Trump's tariff threats are a negotiating tactic or a real plan, what we do know is what we can control. And the Prime Minister has lost control of everything. He's lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending and the deficit, lost control of inflation and housing costs, lost control of his own caucus. This has put Canada in an unbearably weak position. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister reverse all the damage he's done, or will he just call a carbon tax election so we can do it for him?
I think the Leader of the Opposition needs to reflect carefully on whether he really wants to amplify the erroneous narratives that the Americans are putting forward around, for example, our border, when less than 1% of migrants coming into the United States irregularly come from Canada, where 0.2% of fentanyl coming into the United States comes from Canada. These are things that we would all do well to stand up and say, yes, there's things we can and are working on together at our border, but amplifying these broken narratives is simply not responsible leadership.
Simply not responsible leadership. And what surprised me in his response, in the Prime Minister's response there, Eddie, is the fact that he kind of threw it back at the U.S., the Americans, for perpetuating some of what he calls the myths surrounding the Canadian border. When I heard that on Tuesday, while I was watching QP, I immediately thought back to the time that, I think it was the G7, wasn't it, meeting here in Quebec? And Trump leaves early, and he's flying to wherever it was he was flying, and all of a sudden Trudeau's being quoted as saying something derogatory about Trump, and Trump goes ballistic. And does he think I don't have TVs on the plane? I'm not in contact, and called him two-faced, and the whole shooting match. Now Friday night, that picture from that Trudeau tweeted out from the dinner. Look at the smile, especially the smile on Trump's face.
Yeah.
Is that like the cat that swallowed the canary, or what?
Yeah, look like that. It's funny though. We're speaking about kiss the ring. It being the minister coming up with. Explaining that it was put together as poetry in the opposition's basement, but you know what though? Right after President-elect Trump realized that he did win the election, first thing that came to my mind is, let me have a look and see what the reactions from major leaders in the world is going to be. How quickly are they going to be congratulating him? How quickly are they going to be providing accolades or throwing accolades towards him? How quickly are they going to get on the bandwagon to have some quote unquote business discussions with Mr. Trump in preparation for the next 4 years, which could very, very well become just another shit show. And what do? You know what? You very eloquently put it. Bow before the king-to-be. The parliament basically called it kiss the ring. I think to a large degree, a lot of the leaders around the world have to pretty much bow to the leader and kiss the ring, because his temperament is such, and we've seen it historically in the last 8 years, his temperament is as such that if you do not bow or kiss the ring, there can very well be consequences. And now these consequences are not necessarily one-on-one personal vendetta. The consequence could be the entire country that you're leading because you were A, maybe too proud to kiss the ring, or B, you were too stubborn to realize how important it is to get in front of what's going to be happening in the next 3 or 4 years, get in front of it and start dealing with Trump before he actually is sworn in as president. I believe the 20th of January. So I think there's, Mr. Trudeau did exactly that. Call it kiss the ring. Call it bowing down to the king to come. I think he's just trying to get ahead of it at this particular stage, right? Let's put aside everything else in terms of his popularity rating in the country, the criticism of his leadership in Canada. Let's just put that aside for a second, which very well might be a good reason why he's doing this. But at the end of the day, I think you have to get in front of Trump as best as you possibly can. At the end of the day, it might not result in anything. We just don't know that, right? He still could, drop the 25% tariff on Canadian goods. We talked about it last week, where this is a ploy of the deal, as President Trump calls it. President-elect calls it the art of the deal. Throw it out there, threaten, and then see what you pull back a little bit and get more than what you initially planned with. Well, I don't know, Gary. I think what Trudeau did, Prime Minister Trudeau did, in my particular opinion, it's not a bad thing, maybe not a popular thing, but certainly I really think he's just trying to get ahead of the ball game on this one.
I think that for the most part, a lot of the pundits anyway were praising Trudeau this past week for taking the initiative to request the meeting and getting down there as soon as it was agreed to by Trump. Now, apparently, too, both sides wanted to keep it on the QT until at least he got there. I think the Canadians, as somebody said the other day, that perhaps they didn't want it to get out in case Trump, reneged on the request. So there was that side of it. I'm not sure why Trump even wanted to keep it low key. Normally, he doesn't keep any of these things low key, and certainly once Trudeau landed in Florida, it was no secret from there on. Of course, it was no secret thanks to flight trackers, because they were tracking the PM's plane. Of course, when he flies on one of the Air Force jets, it then becomes CF-01, I think is the designation for it. So you're looking for that, and Trudeau's going somewhere. So he's been getting some applause for doing it. I'm of mixed emotions on it, Eddie, to be truthful. I think, yes, open the door and at least try and get the talks started, get a dialogue started. Communication is key. There's no doubt about it. However, on the other side, part of me says it almost looks like we go in with a hat in hand, almost begging, like, please, no, don't do the tariffs. Now, LeBlanc and Trudeau both say, well, we pointed out the fact that it's going to impact your side of the border, your people, your population, as much, if not more, than what it, hurts us on our side. I don't know if that's really scoring any points with Trump at this point. I don't think it is. I think he's, focused on it. And I think he's the bully. And sometimes, you have to deal with the bully in kind of a bully fashion and call the bully's bluff. Mm-hmm. And yes, we're negotiating, and there's no doubt about it. We're going into this negotiating from a position of weakness. But, sometimes you just say, okay, let's back off here and let's not go kissing the ring. Maybe even, skip dinner. Just get in for the meeting and have the meeting and just say, look, you know what? This can work both ways, Donald. So you push us, we're going to push back, and we'll push back just as hard, if not harder, if we can. And it's going to end up costing you as much, if not more so, because you're a much bigger population than what it's costing us. Is that what you want? I don't know. There were too many smiles around that table. There was a picture, the group picture of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were too many smiles, and then when Trudeau clipped the picture just to have the two of them, I don't think I've ever. I can't remember Donald Trump smiling like that before. And it's like I said a few minutes ago, he looked like the cat that swallowed the canary and was quite happy about it. So, I don't know. At least I'll give Trudeau full marks. He's made efforts to open the line of communication, and that's critical. But I think he's going to have to kind of, puff out the chest a little bit and beat it from time to time as well, like in Trump's face, and just say, don't push us. Now, the other side of it is there are other things too. Like there are a couple of things that Trump mentioned, and the one that they're really trying to deflate quickly is the fact that Trump's quip about perhaps Canada should become the 51st state and Trudeau can be governor.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Spur of the moment thing and spur in the jovial situation around that table. I'm sure that it wasn't appreciated by the many around the table, and I think there were some guffaws, polite laughter, if you want to put it. I mean, after all, it is Donald Trump, and you have to placate him.
Polite or awkward?
Very awkward, yeah. And I think at some point he said somebody around the table had mentioned to President-elect Trump, Mr. Trump, you do realize that Canada is a liberal country. And he kind of very quickly quipped back and said, oh, that's not a problem. We'll just split the country in two. Half of the country is going to be liberal and half the country is going to be conservative. And we'll have the 51st and 52nd state of the United States. And that's when he mentioned Trudeau can be governor. Even if you're just joking around, I mean, Donald has to realize these are politicians. They're ministers with huge portfolios, and the senior people within the Canadian government. There's a certain level of protocol you should be following in terms of joking around and so on and so forth. I think this kind of just crosses the line somewhat. But again, you have to realize who it is that's crossing the line here, right? It's Donald Trump, and he's going to say what's on his mind, whether or not there is any sort of substance to it or not. Over the years, we've heard about Donald wanting to do this in Canada, wanting to do that in Canada, wanting to change this in Canada, and so on and so forth, and pointing fingers at Canada for being a communist state at one point. This was years ago. So you got to take what he says with a grain of salt, but in the back of his mind, who knows how serious he is about some of these things, Well,
that's the other side of it. He has proven to be a little off the beaten path with some of his decisions and comments at times, and just diving in like, this is what I think, make it so. And if they don't, if any of the cabinet ministers or don't follow suit, he just does what he used to do on TV. You're fired, and moves them out the door. So, and it's going to be really interesting in January, after January 20th, or on January 20th, to see how many people are packing their briefcases and cardboard boxes, and walking out of their offices for the last time because they've been fired.
Yeah.
He's itching to clean house big time this time around. Now, also the 51st state comment, as I say, here in Canada, they were very quick to try and deflate that balloon. But Trump has mentioned our northern areas on more than one occasion recently. Mm-hmm. And I have to ask myself, is he doing that from a resource-based thought, or is he doing it from a military thought, or is it a combination of both? Because he's itching as well to get drilling started for oil in Alaska as soon as he assumes office. So what is it that's attracting him to our Great White North? And what are we, how are we preparing for that? Now, it could be that he's concerned about, again, first of all, the lack of border security between Canada and the U.S., but what about the lack of border security between Canada and Russia on the northern front? Mm-hmm. And I was reading something the other day. If it indicated that the Russians have a number of bases in the northern part, of just on basically not that far away from Canada's north, a number of larger bases. So, is it that he's concerned about? And of course, our military spending has been a pressure point for him as well. So I have some real concerns about what kind of message he's telegraphing when he starts throwing out phrases and words like that along the way.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, first, I would agree with you on both points. I mean, as president of the United States, or any president for that matter, there should always be a concern about the security in the Arctic, in the Canadian Arctic, especially with an enemy proposed enemy just over the Arctic Ocean from us. And I think there's been a lot of discussion about incursions, Russian incursions militarily, whether it's training or, in fact, all-out war. Most of the missiles are going to be flying over our country. It's the shortest path between Russia and the United States, if that's their desired target, which it would have been. All of that stuff is going to be flying over Canadian heads into the United States, which is why Canada's got such a huge responsibility and obligation for defense as it speaks to NORAD. So militarily, absolutely. I read somewhere earlier this week that the Russians have most of their missile silos based in the northern portions of Russia, of their country. So it makes perfect sense that the shortest path would be over the Arctic. Many of our flights, for example, you fly out of Vancouver to Russia, or northern United States into Russia, you are flying over the Arctic because of the shortest path. So militarily, there certainly has to be an interest, and I can understand Donald Trump's concern in terms of Canada's capability to fulfill its roles and its missions, as said today, in terms of early warnings of any sort of Russian incursions, whether they're coming in from way of Alaska or whether they're coming over the Arctic. I can understand the Americans having concern over our capability in defending the northern borders as it relates to incursions into North America. So that's on the military side. On the resources side, absolutely. Oil has been a topic of concern and something that everybody in the world wants, to have access directly in the Arctic to oil. The Chinese have tried to lay claim to a certain extent. Russia has certainly tried to lay claim to our Arctic territories, and so has the United States. So from the business perspective, and Trump basically said he wants to open up everything that's related to fossil fuels and make it a powerhouse in the world in terms of fossil fuel economics, absolutely has a sight set on putting drilling platforms in the Arctic. And apart from the national interest of the United States in setting up shop in the Canadian Arctic, Donald Trump is about Donald Trump, and he does very little without making sure he's lining his pockets and his oligarchs' pockets in the United States. And all he sees in Canada is one wonderful resource up north, close by. Let's make a lot of buck out of this while I'm president of the United States, and make sure my friends make a lot of buck out of this while I'm president of the United States. And in the meantime, I'll put a big water tap in one of our biggest lakes and draw all our water out into the United States. So, yeah. So militarily, I think it's very important that the United States have a keen interest in our capability in defending the Northern Territories. And B, I think we have to be very strong in managing our Arctic territory and our sovereignty by not allowing foreign organizations to set up shop in our Arctic, which is still a huge resource for us, and us sustaining our overall ranking in the world as the third highest oil reserve rich country in the world. You start letting everybody else into our backyard, what does that do in terms of our capability of conducting business properly internationally, right?
Yep, absolutely. Now, so far, aside from what we heard from LeBlanc the other day and some vague comments from the Prime Minister as well, there's no apparent commitment from Trump that the efforts being made in, the border or along the border with drones and helicopters and eventually more personnel to patrol areas along the border on the Canadian side. There's no apparent commitment from Trump that he's going to ease back on the tariff threat or remove that threat altogether. So again, what did we come away with as far as the meeting is concerned, other than, well, the line of communication has been opened? However, maybe we're looking at that with too much of a positive lens, because yes, the line of communication has been opened, but maybe it's only a one-way line. It's hard to say.
Time to tell.
Yeah. Now, on Tuesday as well, the Prime Minister arranged a meeting, or was it yesterday morning? I think it was yesterday morning. Arranged a meeting with the leaders of the opposition. And in this particular case, Pierre Poilievre did attend, and Trudeau sat down with them to brief them on the conversation that he had with Trump during dinner, and what was back and forth. And coming out of that, I thought, well, maybe in question period following this, that we may get some more of a sense through the questions that the opposition leaders put to Trudeau, but that was not to be the case. Really, they were focused on other things. Now, this must have been a top secret briefing, and everybody agreed to the fact that no, we're not going to go out and say anything to the media or anyone else for that matter as to what you're telling us here. Does that mean that, they're all on the Team Canada roster? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this begins to shake out, probably by this time next week, if anything has really come of it or not.
Well, tell me, Gary. I mean, I being in the United States for the last week or so, I might have missed out on some developments in Canada. How did that First Ministers of our provinces session go with Trudeau? How did that evolve? Were there positive outcomes? Were there positive outtakes from that by the premiers of our provinces?
Well, apparently there were a few of them who laid their concerns on the table big time, and they had the conversation. And coming out of it, at least at this point, Team Canada seems to be intact. However, there are people, political watchers in Ottawa who have suggested that it remains to be seen how long it takes before there's a crack in Team Canada. Already Ontario, and I meant to look for a copy of the ad today, one of the ads. Ontario has made a major buy. Like, they put together the one ad that I did see for TV to remind Americans about what the tariffs, without really mentioning tariffs, about how intertwined our economies are and our back and forth across the border as individuals and what have you. Really slick, well done ad in a very short period of time. And they're buying Monday Night Football in the States. What was their other major buy? Oh, Fox News. They're buying a lot of Fox News. So they're going right in after Trump's root. Like his foundation
base, right?
His base. So, you know what? It's
interesting strategy.
Yeah, they spent a few dollars on the ads themselves. Plus, can you imagine what they're paying to buy? It's Monday Night Football, NFL football, and Fox News. And Fox is number one, as far as the cable news networks are concerned. So they're buying it, and I think the thrust of that buy is more around the evening time with the talk shows, sort of thing. So anyway, you have to give Doug Ford and his group full marks on that. I don't know if any of the other provinces are planning similar moves, or if they're going to just sort of step back and follow the lead from Ottawa and go in that direction. It's hard to say at this stage, but
Well, just to close off a comment on the art of the deal and President-elect Trump. If Canada does not make its commitments to militarily to both NATO and what we're supposed to do in our northern shores, right? Is he going to hit us with the 25% tariff? You know what? I don't know. I would speculate that President-elect Trump is the sort of individual that would say, "Show me the money." Basically, back off when you've actually done what you're supposed to be doing in terms of your 2% NATO commitments and your commitments with NORAD, your commitments with defending the Northern Territory. I think it's going to be more of show me the money and then I'll back off. He might impose the 25% tariff come January, February, as soon as he comes into power. Hopefully pushing our leaders to meet up to their commitments globally in terms of military spending and defense. And once they actually demonstrate they are spending the money, Donald Trump sees that, hey, show me the money and you're showing me some progress, they'll back off. I really don't know. I think both you and I agree that defense is extremely important. A. B. That Canada has been really, really not doing a great job the last 10 to 15 years in terms of funding our military. And directly as a result of that is, whether it's a domestic military capabilities or international military capabilities for peacekeeping efforts to the UN and our reputation abroad, especially when it comes to NATO, we've just been really, really, really bad at it. And you know what? Maybe that's the kick in the pants that our leaders need to allow us to call ourselves a military. I mean, I'm not even sure we can call ourselves an active military anymore because of the spending cuts. So maybe it's the kick in the shins that we needed to get back on the horse and actually become a military force that can be respected around the world for both its capabilities and its deployment to war zones in a peacekeeping effort. We're just far from that. Our ladies and men in uniform just are not properly supported by the government to be able to do the jobs that they elected to do in defending our country, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's stay on politics for a moment, because partial victories were scored on both sides of the House late last week. The Trudeau Liberals managed to get agreement to deal with the bill green-lighting the 2-month GST holiday, despite the Conservatives voting against it. However, the Liberals lost a bid, or at least they've deferred, to have the controversial $250 payment for working Canadians included in the bill. That is still a mountain to climb, as seniors and the disabled, along with other groups, fume over being left out. The feedback on that has been building and building and building, Eddie, since you left on vacation. And people are not happy about the way that $250 check is being applied across the board. People $150,000 a year or less, but you have to be a working Canadian. And that, to me, that, I don't know who the hell came up with that phrase, but that's really a kick in the butt to a lot of people who are unable to work, whether, through disability or illness, whatever, or they're stay-at-home moms with a number of children to look after, and it's hard for them to find daycare, and so they have to stay at home, and they have to depend on social assistance of some sort. That to me was really almost a discriminatory phrasing. All working Canadians, a working Canadians payment. You know what? What about seniors? Yeah, okay, maybe we're retired, but we're still contributing. We're still paying taxes on our pension drawdowns and such. But also, right now, especially, if we didn't have seniors out in the community volunteering to help out various agencies and other groups and to help with parades and you name it, the majority of people on any of these committees and driving any of these boards and organizations, for the most part, you're looking at seniors, retired seniors.
Absolutely.
So they're still contributing to the community overall. They're not getting paid for it because they're volunteers. And everybody, I don't know about you, but I remember when I first retired, geez, that'll be 9 years ago? Yeah, 9 years ago this month. And I received some phone calls about, would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in serving here or whatever? It was just unbelievable. And I'd already, had been contributing to the community in a few ways, and picking and choosing what I could in between work and my responsibilities on the condo board. The condo complex we were living in. Mm-hmm. So it just and then all of a sudden, boom. So we are a vital commodity, and we are a sought after commodity. And yeah, maybe we're not working per se, but we sure as hell are working, because a lot of work was into volunteer organizations, and if you have the time, they'll draw on as much time as you can give them and then some. Right. So right. I just find this working Canadians thing, and And the feeble excuse that they're saying, you know, including people making $150,000, like, yeah, I'm sure they are feeling it to a degree, and maybe some of them are feeling it because they overbought their house when the interest rates were low on mortgages, and now they're feeling that aspect of it, you know. And I mean, that's a human reaction to be able to get what you want and then some if the cost of the money is right. And you know, we'd gone for such a long period of time, whoever expected interest rates to creep back up. But you know, the impact of just jumping 4 or 5% overall coming out of the pandemic and into the, you know, the pandemic aftermath, because we're never really declared in a recession. The R word surfaced a few times, but it was, you know, pushed down very quickly. But you know, it's not like back in the 70s when all of a sudden we were in a recession, and around the time that Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre, was Prime Minister. And we shot up to interest rates of 20%, 20% on mortgages. And a lot of the houses back then, they had all of these government-sponsored programs with mortgages at around 6%. And you know, within a year or so, a lot of those mortgages were coming up for renewal and the government subsidies were ending. And all of a sudden you're going from 6% to 20%. I remember in the neighborhood I was living, it was a new subdivision. And almost every morning I got up and drove down the street going to work in the morning. There was another house that had emptied out overnight. People just packed up and left and walked away. And Deborah has told me stories about there was another part of the province she was living where she was living at the time, and she said some people actually, after they moved everything out, would go in and they would cut the floor joists and let the main floor fall into the basement and then walk away.
Yeah.
Just to, I guess, you know, just out of frustration. Yeah. But that, you know, that was a rough time. It was a really rough time. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to come out of it. But I know that the Bloc is pushing for sure, and now the NDP is on board after saying they were going to support it as one package. They managed to, between the Bloc, and then I guess the Bloc shamed the NDP a bit, and Jagmeet said, okay, well, we'll vote in favor of the tax break, but we have to go back and have a discussion about this $250 payment. Yeah. Now, the other side of that is, yes, businesses are kind of welcoming it in the fact that they're hoping for a real surge in spending, but a lot of these places have to reprogram all of their point of sale terminals.
That's right.
That's, can be a fair amount of work, especially if you have, even if you're like a smaller business, you have 20 of them to do. That's a lot of work to do, to reprogram them. And then they have to reprogram them again in 2 months.
Yeah, I used to work for a major point of sales service supplier. And, it's not something that the merchant can do. This typically takes a technician to actually go on site and possibly swap out the actual point of sales terminal because of the way everything's been pre-programmed. So, you know what? There aren't enough technicians to go around to do all of this on top of that. So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge for retailers and merchants to be able to minimize or eliminate the GST transaction under point of sale terminals in time, or actually, in time for all of this to before everything takes hand and goes online, to be able to deal with this huge change in terms of how they're charging their customers. Are they going to have to go with pencil and paper? I really don't know, but it's a tough ask. It really is a tough ask of merchants. Has anybody even thought about this? Is the other question.
Well, apparently they didn't seem to think of it in Ottawa, but as soon as the word, got out, various business associations and individual business owners were saying, like, what? We had no prior warning?
Yeah.
And it's the same with the provinces. I don't think it's been resolved yet as to whether Ottawa will, compensate them for the loss in the sales tax, their share of the sales tax if it's harmonized, or their sales tax, because Ottawa wants all of the provinces, whether they're harmonized or not, to remove their provincial sales tax from the goods too for the total tax holiday. I have not come across anything yet to indicate that Ottawa has talked to the provinces about this, other than, let's just do this. With the harmonized sales tax, for example, there are terms in the agreement for that, where if something like this does take place, I believe Ottawa is supposed to compensate them for it. The other provinces, I don't know. But if I'm a premier and I'm looking at this and you want me on board, then you better, you blindsided me with the announcement I found out about the same time that everybody else did while you were making your announcement in the grocery store.
That's right.
And that's not, give your head a shake. That's not right. That's not the way to do things like this. Anyhow. Yeah. So he's created some real issues for himself in that respect, and it's going to be interesting to see how he gets out of it between now and sometime in the next 2 weeks, because they'll be going on their Christmas break here shortly, and Poilievre's pushing them now for a fall economic statement, and also I believe it's tomorrow the Conservatives are going to table a non-confidence motion that is supposed to be voted on Friday, but it's worded, they've taken, and you know what? It's just a prime example of be careful of what you say because it can come back to haunt you. But the words that Singh used when he tore up the agreement with the Liberals back late summer, I think it was. Anyway, and Poilievre and the Conservatives are just sitting there, smiling from ear to ear, because it's going to be really interesting to see how Singh kind of squirms on this one and how he ends up going. So
yeah.
Anyway, that's that part of it all. So let's leave Ottawa as such for the time being, because we have something right here in our own backyard that is quite interesting in a lot of ways. And that is completion of Montreal's light rapid transit system known as the REM remains behind schedule and over budget. The original budget when the project was announced back in 2016, was it?
2016.
Yeah, 2016, it was $5.5 billion. That has since ballooned to an expected $9.4 billion, at least this year.
Right.
The first section between the South Shore and the downtown train station opened just over a year ago and was plagued by breakdowns and delays, along with complaints about the noise it generated. Well, that whole thing, since then, we've learned that the completion of the tunnel through Mount Royal is delayed, and also completion of the line out to the airport is also delayed. Those sections were supposed to be open this year, and now it looks like it's going to be 2027, I think it is, that they're planning for. Yeah. Now, it's interesting, Eddie, because I was looking for some things on the web the other day related to this, and I came across some videos, and of course the videos from the REM are going to be complimentary because it's their PR, but I was watching some other videos, like so-called train lovers, and they've come from different parts of the country and the U.S. as well. And they were just gushing over the REM, the cars and the stations and the speed with which it travels along the everything. So there were maybe they did do something right about it, but on the other side of it, yes, it's a very complicated construction project. Maybe the due diligence wasn't up to snuff. That was before my time, but I don't know. What do you recall of it back then?
Well, you know what? Maybe to help you and maybe help our viewers of our show, just to put things into perspective, right? You know what? Here's another project which is funded by three arms of investment. I mean, you had the CDPQ that invested about $3 billion right into the project. They're the ones who are managing the project and the deployment of this entire solution. I think the government of Quebec contributed something like $1.5 billion, and the Canadian government another billion, and the federal government quarter of a billion dollars, I think it was, right? And you're looking at $5 billion to, what did you say, $9.2 billion inflation in terms of the new budget. And I think part of it they were blaming, we found some undetonated old explosives in the tunnel, so on and so forth. But you're talking about a delay that's pretty hefty. I mean, look, they're planning to put 26 stations in from my last count, 5 of which are functional to the South Shore. Right, it's about 67 kilometers of track serving Montreal South Shore, our West Island, Laval West, and I think De Montagne. Okay, all of these areas are going to be served, and then these are supposed to complement the existing transit infrastructure that we have between our subway system, the metro, our bus network, and our train network, right? It's supposed to work with it as opposed to work against it. So you're looking. All right. Let me bring you back to the 60s, all right? The metro, when the metro first came on board. You're talking about 26 stations, which is about the same of what we're doing with the REM. It took them, Gary, are you sitting? It took them 6 years to build, all right? Now you're talking about 80% of the metro was bored through solid rock as opposed to open, construct, and then backfill. So that's 26 stations built in six years. So they built it for $213 million, which today's money equates to $1.6 billion. So explain this to me. How do we go from the 60s to a project that costs $1.6 billion in today's money, digging tunnels underground, hundreds of feet underground, putting an entire infrastructure in place, and here we are today in the 2020s, late 20 teens, where a project is costing 3 to 4 times more and taking longer to build, and it's above ground. All right, so what does that say? I can't believe that our construction workers and our people here in Quebec are that inept. So it goes back to the first portion. How was this planned? How was this projected? How was this engineered that it costs 3 times more in today's money than it did back in the 60s, where today we have more technology available, we have better machinery available, we have a higher skill set of manpower available, yet it's going to cost 3 times more than it did in the 60s, and it's going to take longer to build. So your comment about proper planning and preparation, 150%. Gary, if you were the project manager of this entire thing, okay, and I'm not taking it away from the solution at the end of the day. It's a beautiful solution, okay? I'm not knocking that. What we're knocking here is getting to where we're at, where we need to be in 2027. So here we have a major airport where the biggest complaint by commuters to the airport, there's no way of getting there except your car. How many times have you and I seen people abandoning vehicles and taxis on the way to the airport, taking their luggage out in the snow just to make their flight and walking to the terminal, right? If you were heading up a company that was going to put a light rail system in place in a major city like Canada, where's the first place you would put it? The airport.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's going to be the last thing you're going to do. So it's all about common sense, proper planning, Gary. You and I have both been in the industry in terms of managing major projects. You hit the area that's going to be the most common sense, is going to provide the biggest bang for the buck, and is going to further place your city on the benchmark and pedestal for the rest of the world to look at. If you got a ram in town to Dorval Airport, to Trudeau Airport. And we're going to have to wait till 2027 for this. So it comes down to the planning at the end of the day, to answer your question. No questions about it. Terrible forecasting and planning. And it's going to cost 3 times more in equivalent money than 26 stations of metro being dug underground. It just flabbergasts me.
Yeah, and you know, one of the videos from a train watcher pointed out the fact that going overhead is far cheaper than, you know, tunneling underground for subways.
Right.
And, you know, isn't that what helped to put the kiss of death on Mirabel as a major air hub? Was
Yes.
the fact that you know, there was no real links to make the flow of passengers back and forth from the airport to the city center, you know, easy?
Not at all. Well, you're absolutely right. Mirabel Airport was the international airport here in Montreal. So get this. So let's say, for example, you're a German national and you needed to go to a meeting in Toronto, right? So you'd fly from somewhere in Germany to Mirabel Airport in Montreal. Or sorry, that's a terrible example. Let's say you were flying from Germany and you needed to be someplace in Canada, right? And Montreal happened to be the hub. So you're flying from Europe, you're flying to Mirabel Airport in Montreal. Well, in order for you to catch your domestic flight, you'd have to take a taxi or pack yourself into a bus with 50 other people, get stuck in traffic for 2 hours to take you to Trudeau Airport, known as Dorval Airport in those days, to take your flight to the rest of Canada. Okay? So if you weren't taking a flight into Toronto and the airline was being routed to Montreal as a designated hub for international flights, you had no way of getting to your Canadian destination with any ease. The highway system in Quebec was not finished as promised at the airport. It's still not finished. 1. 2, the light rail system into, or any sort of train transportation into Mirabel Airport between airports was never finished. So what ends up happening? Billions and billions of dollars down the tube. And today, Mirabel Airport is just being used for cargo shipments more than anything else. So you're right, Gary. There's another kerfuffle there where they didn't think this through properly. You know, before you build a baseball field, why don't you build a road to it?
Exactly. Well, and let's not lose sight of the fact that the leg out to the eastern area and that was going to be elevated all the way out, or pretty much all of the way out.
Right.
People were up in arms about that and about how it was going to destroy the streetscapes and that kind of thing. And the cost of it had ballooned out of sight. And so the government took it away from the, CPQ, whatever it is. And they were having another look at it, and the last proposal, they turned it over to the overall transit authority, the Metro Transit Authority here. Mm-hmm. And they came back with a proposal to go even deeper into the eastern suburbs and the cost was, if you thought the cost of the stretch of the elevated highway was, or train track was a lot, this went way beyond, and so they've just kind of put, so okay, that's it, and it just sits there now, like it's just a proposal, a dream, a gleam in somebody's eye.
Yeah.
And they've spent a lot of money on engineering studies and architects and everything else, and what they had proposed, what I saw of the conceptual drawings, I thought it looked really quite sleek and very modern to be going down the street. And it's not like the old days, like when you see the L in Chicago and the others in like places like New York City, where you've got these huge either cement infrastructure pieces going above you, or steel, and basically underneath is just reduced to nothing more than a parking lot. This was like it was going to be a public area and different things like that. And it just, I thought it was a major step forward, even more so than what we have, running through here now.
Well, it's interesting too. I think you were mentioning CDPQ as the
Thank you.
managing
Yeah.
body, CDPQ.
Yeah.
You're looking at planning. The Vaudreuil area, which is across the river off Montreal Island, right? I mean, presently today it's served by the antiquated Ilotord Bridge, which is beyond its useful age more than 10 years ago, and they're continuously shutting it down, repairing it, and so on and so forth. All in the meantime, discussions being held in terms of, how is the REM going to extend throughout the city and into the suburbs? You know what? They've got a great plan getting into Laval, our North Shore. They've got the existing infrastructure in place with the light rail system into our South Shore. They're planning 2 arteries into the West Island. You mentioned to me that not planning, but it's already under construction. They're going to begin testing. They started discussing a network out east, but that's kind of been kiboshed and sitting on somebody's dining room table. What about out to Vaudreuil? There's something like 80 to 90,000 vehicles crossing that bridge every day. There is one rail line that's run by the public transit system. I think they got like 2 runs a day to take people in and out of Vaudreuil. That area of suburban Montreal has been growing hand over fist. I mean, I used to drive through it and all you saw was bush. Now all you see is homes, you see strip malls, you see all sort of major industries out there. It's really grown. Now the only way for these people to get into work on the island is by car. Okay? The last REM station is in Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, on the wrong side of Lac de Deux-Montagnes. Now, at the beginning, they were proposing on building a replacement bridge, the Ilotord Bridge or replacement bridge. Initially, what was tabled, and the CDPQ was actually involved with the discussion and studies, they were not going to build a place to extend the REM into Vaudreuil. What are they thinking? And only recently, due to public pressure, and heavy pressure on the MPs in the area and the parliamentarians and the people in the Quebec government, only now have they said, oh, you know what? I think we're going to study on the feasibility of making room for a potential expansion of the REM to Vaudreuil. Like, goes back to planning and understanding not what the demographic requires today. What does the demographic require tomorrow? And it just flabbergasts me. Here's a project to the East End, which is in dire need of more transportation. I mean, above and beyond the metro, along the river's edge, something that should be put into place, and now it's sitting on somebody's coffee table. And here we have an opportunity to connect the other side of the lake, of the rivers, the merging rivers. And until recently, they've only said, oh, we're going to begin a study and looking at the feasibility of this. This should have been done day one along with Pierre Elliott Trudeau Airport. And for some reason, there is an overall reluctance for them to do something like this. Is it money, Gary? Is it because they know they're already way over budget and way overpriced to what it should be, that they're trying to cut corners at the beginning to not really demonstrate how expensive it could be? Is there a lack of willingness? I really don't know. But, East End Montreal, Vaudreuil, Trudeau Airport, these places are huge in terms of population and huge in terms of value for the dollar, and extending a public transit system to all these places, right?
Well, delaying it is only going to drive up the cost even more. I don't get why they didn't foresee the population growth when you have all kinds of studies and projections that you can draw upon, and even, again, hire the consultants to do your own. But it's a solid mistake. And what's going to happen is, down the road, people are going to end up paying far more for it, because it's going to have to be built at some point. And it's going to be in whatever dollars when it's built, whether it's, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, who knows? But the fact of the matter is, it's going to cost far more than what it would cost now. And the other side of it is, I would think you have expertise at your fingertips right now from the construction of the existing line that we have, that you can draw upon and say, okay, I'm sure a lot of the people involved say, yeah, you know what, this was a mistake, that was a mistake. Let's get together and how do we fix this, or at least amend it or correct it for the next phase of the project. You do the debrief and you learn from your mistakes and you move on, but that does not seem to be the case here for whatever the reason. Yeah. I think it's a lack of political will in a lot of ways, although very quick to spend, almost $1 billion on a roof for a place that, people...
That's not used. That's not used.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a lack of foresight and a lack of will at times to do what needs to be done. And, it's the same as pushing cities to develop high-density residential areas. Well, you do, it's great, but you do it in a planned manner. I mean, when you look at Griffintown, our neighborhood,
right,
I cannot yet understand, and I'm not the brightest guy on the earth, and I'll be the first to tell you that, but I cannot for the life of me understand how these condo towers were allowed to go up without some kind of proper access for service vehicles and garbage and compost and recycling removal, without wheeling them all out onto the sidewalk and the roadway, taking up valuable parking spots. And I mean, just, it's sitting out in the hot summer sun. You know what it's like walking by some of these places on recycling day, for example, on Wednesdays, and what it smells like. And every new building, I don't see any change in the approach to that as to, can you imagine the one across the street from us when that opens up and people start moving in?
Mm-hmm.
Where the hell, that's all going to be lining Ottawa Street.
Where are the trucks going to go?
And it'll all be lining Ottawa Street. And Ottawa Street's, not that wide of a street to begin with, especially in that area. How is this allowed to happen? Yes, the developers are going to push back because of the additional expense, but even like the moving trucks. where the hell do they go? They end up on the sidewalk. They end up halfway in the road and halfway on the sidewalk. And sometimes there's push and shove. The parking police come by, and it's it's not a pleasant experience. And I don't blame the guys and gals driving the trucks. It's not their fault. We want our parcels. Yep.
This thing is going to go live next spring. That's 550 units plus. That's 550 moving trucks and vehicles we're going to see here. And unfortunately, because of the way Quebec works, it's all moving day, July 1st.
Oh, my God.
You know what, Gary? I think we're going to leave the city for a while. 2 weeks after that. Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be something else, yeah. But I don't understand how we have not learned our lesson from what exists now. Right. But and that's been a real bug of mine, and but I know dealing with developers at times, and it can be a headstrong show for like dealing with Donald Trump. Did I say that? Yeah. So, and with that, Eddie, I guess it's time to put a wrap on another show. Believe it or not, we've covered a lot of ground in the last hour and 12 minutes or so.
Before we sign off, I have one final question for you, Gary.
Yeah.
Now that both you and I, we didn't work last year, we're both retired. Now it's 100% assurance that you're not going to get $250 from the government, right?
Right.
Does that mean that steak meal that you promised to buy me is off the table? No steak and beer? No steak and beer this time?
No steak and beer. Yeah, no. And you can blame it. You can blame it on Justin.
I'll blame it on him then.
Yeah. Not my fault. Justin's fault.
Okay.
Okay, so remember, folks, to like, subscribe, and share our videos to help us continue to build this channel. Also, if you are viewing the video at a later time, by all means, please leave a comment there to help our engagement grow as well. Night Talk returns in 7 days from Montreal. Good night. Good night, Eddie.
Good night.